Hey, good morning, and welcome to the Comics Experience Graphic Novel of the Month Club, the Kids Edition, my favorite show because kids are the future and kids comics are the greatest thing. I'm very excited to have this book this month. This is February, by the way, February of 2025, and we've got a really fun book for you. That book is Mr. Muffins, Defender of the Stars. What a great title, too. And we're really happy to have with us Ben KAHN and GEORGEO Brooks. Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
thank you so much for having us on today, Brian.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk about this. So I always ask the same question as the first question because I really like it. And I really think it gets to what we're talking about. And it's essentially this: why comics? Of all the things you could be doing, of all the ways you could be expressing yourself, what is it about comics that gets you going? That makes you thrilled? That particularly because comics are a very labor-intensive process, something that takes a long time to make. So why comics? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I guess I could tackle that first if that's all right.
Sure.
I mean, so much of, those things that growing up reading, web comics and then, scans of Naruto and Dragon Ball as a kid, early comics were so much of what filled, gave so much just magic, so many of those moments that just made me laugh and, cheer and all those big emotions. And, as labor intensive, like you said, as I said, it still seemed like so much more of an achievable thing compared to like making a whole big budget Hollywood movie or making a whole video game. It still seemed like something that, like get it just like a good team of passionate creators together and you can make something great happen. And unlike prose, I don't have to describe what chairs look like.
I think it's a similar thing for me. Growing up, I read like a lot of manga as well and watched a lot of cartoons as well. But something about finding the comics, I realized, oh, I could do that too. I could draw it and then have a story, and it's a lot more instant than if I were trying to get into animation or something. And I just ended up going down that route from about, I think I drew my first comic. It was like a 7-page thing back in high school, my first year. I was just like, oh, I'll just try making a comic. And then I started it and I would show it to my classmates as I did pages, and I just kind of kept going from there.
I love that. My start was I took the little graphics, little sprites from the Kingdom Hearts Game Boy Advance game, and I put them together in Microsoft Paint and added dialogue and because I can't draw to save my life, but I could work Microsoft Paint and take these little video games and make them just say all sorts of outrageous things. So that was my
Yep.
issue 0 of comics.
Ben, that's very funny because Kingdom Hearts is kind of the start of comics for me too, because I specifically had a Kingdom Hearts manga, and that was the one where I looked at it and I was like, I'm going to try this right now. And that was kind of like the reference that I used for, I guess, trying to figure out paneling and things like that.
I love that, and I know the exact manga you're talking about.
Yep.
Well, I love that answer, and it's interesting because I would not have by looking at the book and reading the book, I would not have gone, oh, manga is your biggest influence.
It's true though.
Yeah, no, I mean, I believe you. I'm not doubting you at all.
Same, like as much as I absolutely love, like Batman, Green Lantern, and like X-Men. Yeah, before I was reading that, I was reading Naruto, reading Bleach.
Yeah.
Bleach, Naruto, One Piece. Tenchi Muyo was one of my first ones, actually.
Oh yeah. Anything that was on old school Toonami back in the day when the block was like Yu Yu Hakusho, Dragon Ball Z, and Gundam Wing.
Yeah.
I love
Good
it.
times. Good times.
Those were, but yeah, no, and I feel like so much of what in the book was trying to take like that level of just imagination and action and being like, what if we merged that with Air Bud?
Yeah, it's interesting because the structure of manga is pretty different than this book. Manga is mostly told in 8-page segments and serialized and then stitched together as a graphic novel, whereas the chapters here are like a good 30-35 pages long.
I mean, as a writer, I definitely had a lot of fun being able to go like page count, what? Never heard of it. And just kind of write to my heart's content and let every scene breathe, not ever let every let every big moment have that half a page that it needs to like fully land. Don't need to cram things into 6 or 7 panel pages. F it. Let's just have 3 and 4 panel pages everywhere, so everything can be big and have space to breathe. So I did have a lot of fun, and credit so much to our editors at Oni who really kind of gave us that runway and looked at the initial draft and said, if you have more jokes, like if you have more here, go for it. If there
Oh,
is
that's
more story to tell, more world to build, more jokes to tell, put it back in. And
interesting.
so really lucky to have that creative partner to just that encouraged us to just make this book the best and the most it can be.
Yeah. So we've got about 164 pages here. What was your like? Did you turn in less than that originally?
Yeah, there was a little less world building originally, like with the planet area. We spent a little less time kind of just exploring it. And some of the original, I don't want to spoil quite what the big action set piece and the climax is. I want people to get to that reveal for themselves. But we changed some stuff there that I think ended up being a lot more fun. And we added more of the evil alien stranded back on Earth.
Nice, nice.
Which I wasn't sure how hard to go on that joke, so I was glad when they said we like this joke. So I went like, great, I've got a bunch more I want to put in.
Great. How many pages was it originally?
Uh, Probably like about like 130, 140.
Okay.
So I say we probably added like about, what do you think, Giorgio? Is that about like 15 extra pages from the original draft, I think, to what
May-
ended up being the final one?
Maybe at this point, I don't even remember.
It's been a while. I want to say it was maybe around like 15 to 20 extra pages we ended up putting in. It kind of went from about like a 130-page script to a 150-page script.
Mhm. And Giorgio, was that I don't know, difficult, maybe the wrong word, but you thought that the shape of a project, because you've got to draw it, right? Like, a writer, it's
Mhm.
a little easier to add pages.
Yes, this was me being a big jerk and putting more work on Giorgio's plate.
Nah, I mean, I
So
enjoyed every little bit of the expansion to what I have to work with because my favorite thing with comics is really diving into like those character interactions. So Ben adding in more of that was just like more for me to be like, oh boy, here I go, something to sink my teeth into.
I love it.
God, and those
Let-
expressions, just every big face, it just makes me smile.
Well, let me ask you guys another question. Did you guys, either of you, have any formal training to do comics, or did you study writing, Ben, for example?
So I was an English major
Mhm.
undergrad. I went to school in Philadelphia, and the closest I'd probably get to formal comics training is that I would do everything in my power in college to figure out a way to develop my ideas for comics, like on class time. Figure out a way to work them into screenwriting scripts or prose short stories, even if it made no sense. Everybody else's short stories would be like, and then the old man went to the river of his childhood in the pickup truck. And then I'd come in with like, and then the mummy and the vampire team up and they're going on adventures.
And what was the reaction of your teachers to that?
It was honestly funny because like it was much more genre and like fantasy or sci-fi than like my teacher was certainly used to. And so what you'd have is like we'd read the stories, I'd be playing with tropes and story devices, and the teacher would have no idea what the heck I was talking about or doing with these stories. But there would be other people in the classes who would kind of sometimes like stand up and defend the story, be like, no, 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 it's all based on this. If you've seen these shows or played these games, you'd understand what kind of like storytelling they're playing with.
Mm-hmm.
So it was me just kind of, refusing to do the stories that the teacher wanted and just being like, but this will help me work through the ideas I want to do, even if I got to swallow that B minus.
And Georgie, how about you? Did you have formal training in comics, or did you just start drawing yourself? Like, what's your secret origin on that part of it?
Yeah, in my case, I would say that I did have formal training in it and that I went to Memphis College of Art and I was a dual major actually in illustration and sequential narrative, which is just comics basically. But even prior to that, like I said, in high school, I started a comic. And while I was in school, I did, I think, 2 other comics. And then my BFA piece, that was what I presented to graduate, was also a comic. I can actually show it here. This is like a little part of it. Solving Zandra was kind of the story that I was working on through school and what Ben saw and how we ended up starting Mr. Muffins, basically.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that. How did you guys meet? How did you what's the formulation there?
Yeah, so we met at SPX one year when Giorgio was tabling and I was there just walking around. I kind of had this idea percolating in my brain, this kid's adventure book about a magical corgi fighting aliens in outer space. And I kind of had a vague idea of like kind of a style I thought would be good, but I didn't quite know what I was looking for. But like, I wasn't even going there specifically to be like, ooh, gotta find artists for this specific project. It was just an idea that I'd kind of had in the back burner. And as soon as I saw Giorgio, it was one of those like, I didn't know I was looking for it, but I found it. And as soon as I saw like Solving Chandra and Giorgio's artwork, I'm just like, yes, like this is it. This is the this is the expressions. This is the movement. This is the energy. This is the personality and the life that this book is gonna need. So like as soon as I saw that, I'm just like, I found the artist. I found the perfect artist for this book. And so I reached out to Giorgio and was so thankful that he said yes and came aboard. And we got to work putting together the pitch for Mr. Muffins.
Yeah. But do you have any recollections of that period yourself, Giorgio?
No, actually. I remember the email, of course, but I don't actually remember meeting Ben. Like, did we get a chance to speak?
I think we talked briefly, but like I think I might have been in such like a rush and looking through it that like I think at the time I didn't want to be like come on strong and creepy and just be like a stranger coming out of the crowd being like, I got a job for you. So I think I tried to probably play it cool and then tried to be a little more professional like in the email. But internally I was if I'd expressed externally what I was feeling internally looking at your art, you would probably been like, I need to steer clear of this person. They are not right in the head.
Well, when you got this email, Giorgio, because you said you remember the email, do you like what was your reaction?
Well, the main thing that caught my eye was the fact that the email said paid work.
Oh yeah.
Right then I was like, oh, okay, let's see. Let's really dive into this, because previously sometimes people would express interest in working with me, but it was usually pro bono, more or less.
Yeah.
So if there are any aspiring comic writers out there wondering how to put together projects, yeah, that's a really good piece of advice. If you are able to save up and offer your collaborators a rate for their work, that will go extremely far. But in a more philosophical sense, my attitude towards it, and this has been the attitude I've tried to show towards all my collaborators across all my projects, is if you are asking people for professional work, that means treating them like professionals, and being a professional means getting paid for your work.
Yeah.
100%. That definitely signaled to me that you were serious and that I should really pay attention to it as well.
But this was before
Hooray
you
for
had,
money.
but this is before you had any kind of a contract or a deal or anything like that. So you were strictly coming out of your own pocket, Ben, yeah?
Yes. So I think that originally, so I didn't go all in on being like, let's do a 150-page graphic novel together. I think we said like, let's do like 5 to 8 preview pages, like not like a script preview, and let's see if we can get some interest in this. And that's what we did. We put together that little pitch packet. It was Reuben complaining about, in the book, it is homework and all the things his mom has signed him up for at the time. In the original pitch, Reuben was a young adult complaining about being overworked at an underappreciated job, and a spaceship crashes while he's at the park with his best friend and pet corgi, Mr. Muffins. And that was the scene we went with for the pitch, which I was able to give to editors at Oni Press at C2E2. And then about 8 months later, I got a Twitter DM from the editor at Oni being like, we've reviewed the pitch. We like it. We have notes. Your kid's book should be about a kid. We said, yes, you're 100% right. I felt very dopey and silly for ever having Reuben, our main character, ever being anything other than 11 years old. We adjusted the pitch, and then we were off to the races with Oni.
How old was Reuben in the original pitch?
About like 22, 23. We were going for, I was kind of going for that like first time in the adult world and just being crushed by all the responsibilities of it, which ended up translating beautifully to a fifth grader who is just beset by homework and classes and soccer practice and piano practice and family obligations for family he does not feel close to.
Yeah. How fully formed was the pitch at that point? Did you have the whole thing kind of figured out, or were you still trying to sort it through?
I'd say what we had at that point was like we had the basic 4-chapter arc. Like we had the framework. We kind of knew what the big action set piece location of each of the 4 chapters was. Starting out with, one alien ship attacking in the park to, a big adventure, a big kind of more wacky adventure on this brand new alien planet, to then dealing with a whole army of spaceships, to finally the mystery confrontation, which you are just going to have to read the book to find out what that is.
Yeah. Did you guys talk this out, or was this mostly from you leading, Ben?
I think it was a lot like, Georgia, please feel free to correct me if I'm misremembering, but I think it was more like I kind of came up with outline documents and then would share them with you just to make sure that we were going in a direction that you were good with, and then I was kind of off to the races with the script.
Yeah, pretty much. As a writer, I trusted your judgment, so I pretty much just let you take the lead for everything, and then maybe if I had like a tiny little note or something, but I just trusted you to write. That's what you do.
Yeah, I
do it
tried to
well.
make sure I was giving you stuff that you'd have fun with. And yeah, anytime you have like a note or an idea, I always tried to make sure that I was incorporating that. Anytime. So yeah, just generally as a writer, my attitude towards going into a script is it's like the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie. It's more guidelines. My attitude is, if the artist is at the end of the day, this is a visual medium that's going to be told visually, I need to trust the final storytelling to the way the artist sees it. So my attitude is generally, if the artist sees a different or better way of interpreting or laying out the scene, go with that. But let me as the writer make sure that I'm providing everything the artist needs to still like be able to do that scene, whether that's, location information, body language, emotion. Let me make sure that if they have a better way of doing the page, yes, that's the way I always want it to be. But let me make sure I'm not making the artist ever struggle to have to figure out how to compose a page, is kind of what my goal, at least.
Sure, no, absolutely. And Giorgio, is that how you took it? I mean, did you feel like you were given good things that gave you a lot of freedom to put your own imprint on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, I remember sometimes being almost surprised just how much kind of free reign I had over the visuals. I can only think of maybe one instance where Ben had notes about just tweaking something in a scene to make it hit a little more like how they were imagining it. But yeah, I had a lot of freedom to just kind of play around and draw things how I saw them in my brain.
It's kind of beautiful, like not just having the freedom, but also getting paid to have that freedom.
Yeah, it does help.
Yeah. What was your favorite thing that you encountered in that pitch, Giorgio?
I think it was basically being able to experience the story in 2 different ways. Once reading the script multiple times, and then another time as I board it, experiencing it again, but it's a little more solid this time. So imagining it versus actually being able to see backgrounds and the angles and maybe how a character is feeling.
Was it at all an adjustment for you as the artist to go from a 20-something protagonist to an 11-year-old protagonist?
Not much, because I try to keep them expressive either way. Because Reuben, honestly, the first time I drew him, he was of course older, and then I just shrunk him down, but he was still just as expressive.
He has the same outfit too. I love it. He's the same.
Shrunk.
It's like the same yellow shirt, yellow t-shirt, and red button down. I love it.
I love that. So it took him 8 months to get back to you, you said, and then I'm assuming, maybe incorrectly, that you had to do a certain amount of rewriting etc.?
Well, really just writing at that point, because aside from like the preview portion and like the general outline, I really hadn't written out a full script yet. So it was definitely kind of like still working with the Oni editors at that outline phase. And so it was only, and then I was really spent a few months kind of putting together the script and writing it. I got so into it at one point. Like it was like Christmas break. I had people over, but I was just having so much damn fun with this story. I just could not stop writing it.
Yeah. How much changed with the aging of the protagonist, or did anything change, especially?
Honestly, very, very little changed. It's like the themes, again, like the themes about feeling like overworked but having responsibility for your loved ones stayed the same. I would say the only things that changed was that everything is better. Like I feel like Reuben's relationship with Kasara, with the alien Kasara, now has more of a big sister, little brother vibe that I think made it a lot more fun. It's now sort of like Reuben and like, the boy and his childhood dog, which come on, like who doesn't love like a good old boy and his dog story? I think it just makes him that much more relatable as someone who's just struggling at that point where he still feels like a kid, but more and more real responsibilities and expectations are starting to be heaped upon him.
Yeah, that makes sense. When was this that Oni accepted the pitch?
I want to say this was around 2018 or 2019.
Okay.
Was
One of those two, yeah. 'Cause I was there
Yeah.
agree to as well.
So
Yes.
kind of 6 or 7 years of gestation before it finally came through.
I think it was just, I mean, I think we just kind of took the time we need with the creation process.
Sure.
It was just kind of, we had to juggle deadlines and jobs and various life things that life threw in our way. Yeah, various work and health stuff. But ultimately, we just kind of, this is just kind of like, we little engine that could in it. I think I can. I think I can. And so like we just kind of, there wasn't a huge like on and off period. We kind of just kept chugging along, doing what we could bit by bit, and slow and steady won the race, and we got to that finish line.
Nice.
And we got, I mean, I would have to beg Giorgio. I'm like, Giorgio, your backgrounds, they're too detailed. Your character's too expressive. You're too bad for this, Giorgio.
It's true. I do need to be reined in a lot. I hyper focus on backgrounds a little too often sometimes.
But they all turned out amazing, and it looks phenomenal.
Yeah, it really does. Yeah, it's a great looking book. Oni had switched editors, switched whole team, but between that period and when the book finally came out. Was there any issues or conflict from that? Like, did the new people running the company go, "Oh, that's not quite what we want. We want some changes"?
No, I mean, we got to work with some great people at Oni. We got to work with some really talented editors who all just put the story first, even as we understood what everyone was going through, weathered the transitions. But everyone that came on board just kind of fell in love with this little corgi and believed in the project. So yeah, even through all of that, we were really just able to kind of stay the course. There was really, and after we kind of locked in that final version of the script, even with different editorial teams, that script kind of stayed the same, and we just kept moving forward on the art process. So we were really lucky that to just keep working with people that believed in us and believed in what we were doing and gave us that space to just make this story exactly what we envisioned.
Oh, that's beautiful. I didn't expect the answer was going to be any different, than that. But it's very nice to hear that they were respecting the creative process and letting you take it where you wanted to. That's very cool. So how do you work, Ben? Did you write full script? Are you writing just sort of synopsis with just pages? Like what's a script look like for you?
No, I definitely go full script. So you'll see, for my scripts, it'll be, every page, page X, panel Y, like description, dialogue, all the dialogue numbered, because that's another handy tip that letterers like if you number your dialogue on each page. But for me, especially, comedy is a kind of not necessarily my like background in any kind of professional sense, but I'd say my kind of creative foundation, spent a lot of time, watching stand-up comedy, really studying rhythms and cadence, a lot of sitcoms, stand-up. So to me, a lot of scenes, jokes and comedy is very foundational to my writing process, but that requires that, like whole scenes are built around punchlines being delivered in very specific ways at very specific times. So I'm always thinking with that kind of like panel to panel sense of timing in mind.
Yeah. Do you, for your own sake at least, maybe not, maybe you're giving it to Giorgio, maybe you're not, do you do your own kind of breakdowns of what the page looks like so that visually that you see that it's working correctly, or are you just keeping it all in your head?
When I was starting the writing process, when I was just starting, like kind of teaching myself how to write comics, I would do that. I would be writing scripts in my notebook, and then I would do little stick figure thumbnails. And I really think that is a useful tool, especially when you're starting out, like just to help you visualize the page. And then as I just grew more comfortable as a writer, grew more comfortable in my sense of understanding the comic page and my sense of navigating it, I kind of stopped doing that. And part of it is also just needing to just, put trust in your creative partner. Like they are here to see it, to see the story visually, trust them that they will know how to lay it out in the way that's best. But also there is stuff you can do in your writing descriptions where you can just be like, hey, this is the big dramatic panel of the page, so let's give this as much room as we can give it. Or, I find, not that comics and film obviously very different mediums, but there is certain language in regards to camera angles and camera movements that I find very useful. Being able to be like, hey, I think this could be like an over the shoulder shot from this character's perspective. Or like, hey, this is the villain reveal, so like let's make sure we have like a low angle shot to really emphasize like that like intimidation factor. So I think it's a great tool for starting out, but I think at a certain point, I think it behooves people to learn how to kind of express that textually and have faith in your partners to just deliver kick-ass layouts.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Giorgio, when you received this script, what was your reaction? I mean, did you just launch straight into it? I think you mentioned that you read it a couple of times first. What was your approach and process?
Yeah, so the first time I saw it, I was pretty much just smiling at it, basically, because the whole thing was so fun. After that, when it came to doing things like layouts, and when I say there's different versions of it, that's a lot of those different versions are like little corrections, and then a few things are like added pages. But as far as I remember, it didn't change too much from, I would say, probably the second draft up until whatever number we stopped at then. I'm not sure. Maybe it
Yeah,
was 5?
yeah, by then it was like little tweaks, like
Right.
going through and being like, hey, this one specific line isn't quite landing. Can we rework this into like into like a better punchline? Or it
Mhm.
was, as the pages came in, I would kind of go through them and be like, okay, let me move this line from this panel to this panel, because the way Giorgio drew it, I actually think it has a little more space in this panel and it'll flow nicer
Yeah.
that way.
I
So
do
those were a
remember.
lot of those little tweaks. And that's just another handy writing tip is that going through after the art is done and reviewing your script again and just making those tiny tweaks to it. Because, it's always a lot easier to adjust a Word document than it is to adjust art.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Yeah,
so
I mean,
these changes were all textual changes and not asking Giorgio to redraw something.
Yeah, no, exactly. These are changes, exactly like I said, where it's like, oh, I originally had this line in panel 3, but the way Giorgio drew it, I actually now think this line will flow a little better if it's in panel 2 instead.
Mm-hmm.
So more like
if
changes
anything,
to then like add to the like for the letterer to
if
have
anyone
it
was
that
trying
pace.
to get something redrawn, it would just be me, and then it would be like, no, no, it's fine, it's fine the way it is. And I'm like, maybe I could do this part like better. And it's like, it's good, it reads. I'm like, okay. But yeah, from even reading the first scripts, going back to talking about the layouts, I was already starting to kind of envision like seeing a page and thinking, what angle would this be from? And I kind of did basically 2 versions of thumbnails where I had these little notepads and I would kind of make little squiggles to kind of set out the scene first before I went back in and did a cleaner version where you can actually see what's happening. So it was just kind of shapes at first. And that's how the story started visually, based on some of the early drafts of the script. But I'm not sure if I really shared. Ben, did I show you those? It's like a little drawings on notepads and like 4
I'm not
pages.
sure. I think I think you sent like a few like screenshots of like a few of, but I think what I first saw was like the more formal thumbnails you sent
Mm,
was, I think that was the first phase that I saw.
yeah, mostly those were me just organizing my thoughts. And then, like you said, you ended up seeing the more finished thumbnails.
I would love to see just Mr. Muffins just being this little potato with legs and thumb fork.
Just like 2 lines. I still have them. I think they're in storage right now though, but I do still have them.
When you're doing, let's call it the looser thumbnails, how much time are you putting into that, Giorgio? Is it are you just kind of knocking them out to just sort of organize on the page what you're doing, or are you really thinking through the angles and the shapes?
I think it's a little bit of both. For me, a lot of, I think, planning with layouts and things, part of it's deliberate, part of it's just instinctual, just because I've been doing it for a while and I kind of get the sense of how this should be viewed from and things like that. But yeah, I try not to spend too much time on this version of it because it was just really the foundation. And then I could tweak it more as I actually blew it up and started drawing it on the iPad for the actual thumbnails.
How long would you say you put into the looser thumbnails?
I would try to do like a few pages per sitting.
Okay.
So maybe per page, like maybe 5 minutes tops.
Nice.
I think
Okay.
some of the more complex scenes required a little more thought, but yeah, I was just trying to lay them out
Yeah. So it really is kind of just gestural at that point, I suppose.
pretty much.
Yeah. And then when you do your more detailed thumbnails, how long does that take?
That's a hard question. I honestly don't
Well,
remember.
roughly. I mean, I'm not trying to pin you down.
Yeah. It's just that it's been a while since I did the rough thumbnails. I could say that I would take as much time as I thought I needed because between the thumbnails and the sketch, they were kind of like the same step for me. So I kind of wanted to be able to ink almost over the thumbnails rather than doing the sketches. I don't think it quite worked out that way 100% of the time because I'm so particular. But yeah, the layout was very important for me to be able to imagine finishing it, I think.
And how much of that layout is how the page looks versus how panels flow from one to another? If that makes sense as a question.
It actually does. It does make sense. So I pay attention to things like if a character is on the right of the page in one panel, I try to keep them in the right in the other panel. And if there is a shift, I try to make it where maybe there's a single panel. I think about the page flow as well. So I not only look at what's needed for the panel itself, but trying to make sure that there's a sort of subconscious intuitiveness, I guess, to your eye wandering through the page. And
Yeah.
it's hard to talk about. It's just something that I kind of do.
There's really nothing quite like the comic book page. The very first question was like, why comics? There's nothing, it's so challenging, but it's so rewarding. There's nothing quite like that incremental unit of storytelling that is the comic book page. Animation, movies, TV. What 1 minute of time is 1 minute. Prose you could write endlessly, but a comic book page is this, it's this, you have, as you physically, you only have so much space, but then the way you can kind of manipulate time and storytelling within that physical space, there's nothing quite like that unit, the comic page. And
No,
Giorgio, the way you approached it, to like each page just a delight, the way you drew it.
Yeah, it feels almost like doing alchemy in a way. It's like I don't know 100% what I'm going to end up with. I just take the script and take my gut and some basic storytelling rules and then take it from there. I'm looking at one of the copies right now, scrolling through the
It
pages.
is a leap of faith, which is a thing we have in the book that is, I think, might be my favorite sequence that you drew, like in the whole thing,
I love
Giorgio.
that sequence. Yeah.
I saw one review that talked about Reuben's like shirt billowing behind him in the wind like a cape, and I'm just like, God, I didn't even pick up on that detail, but you're so right.
Yeah. Well, this is one of the great things to me about the comics page as a unit is that the audience has so much say in how they perceive it. You know, it's not like that in movies or television, because you're just seeing what the cinematographer has shot for you, what the director is trying to get across. But you know, in the comics page, it's not at all uncommon, for me at least. You start reading and then you're like, oh, wait a minute, now I want to go back and reread the first panel again, or I want to flip back 4 pages to, oh wait, let me look at the setup to that sequence again. You know, and that doesn't really happen in other media that I can think of.
No, I think you're right. It's
Really?
like, you can go back and rewind a movie, but it's not quite the same, like you said, as just flipping back through a comic, especially this comic page where you're focusing one panel at a time, but you're kind of seeing all these moments of time all at once. There's a certain Dr. Manhattanness to being a comic book reader.
Yeah.
It just flips back and forth through the pages.
Yeah.
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 Time
And
is one of those very interesting things with comics because it's ultimately the reader that ends up setting the timing of everything. Unlike with cinema and things like that, there's a concrete set time because you're looking at it. But with comics, you can go back and read it. The scene can happen as quickly or as slow as you imagine it, pretty much.
yeah, and quite often the audience is able to fill in things, you know, that you only infer or imply as creators. I mean, my example is always when Lucy holds the football for Charlie Brown, right? If you actually look at the comic, though, they show Schultz almost always shows Lucy holding the football and then Charlie Brown flying through the air. And so, who actually pulled the football away? It's the audience is the one who pulled the football away. It's not on the page at all, you know, but you fill it in your head because that's the conclusion that you can come to when you see image 1 and then, you know, reaction B, and then, oh, okay, you made that story in your head, which is the power to me of comics.
Hmm.
And that's one of the
Absolutely.
things I absolutely love about comics is choosing what to show and what not to show. You take like, your classic just punching a person. You could like show the, fist right in the jaw, just showing the full impact, or you can have, or you can cut that moment, have the person like reaching back, like pulling back, and then bam, next panel is the person just against the like on the ground, and in your head you fill in the impact. So much, I think, comic writing, the writing process for me at least, is a lot of these scenes in my head, they play out as movies first, and it's like taking a film reel and cutting out the specific screenshots you need from that moving picture film to be able to understand the story.
Yeah, Giorgio, since he wrote full script, which means all this stuff was all detailed, how often did you, as the artist, go, I think I've got a better way to frame this?
Well, since it wasn't, or do you mean like after setting it up and then going back and thinking I have a better way to frame it, or reading it and then?
Yeah, I think from reading the script and going, well, I can draw it this way, but I actually think it'll work better if we do it this way.
There's been a few instances where, not really against the script, but against my own judgment, where I would have actually two different versions of one panel and then kind of decide either which one I feel like works better in the end by asking Ben or asking my partner. And that happened a few times, I think. But that's just the freedom of comics. There's like no one right answer per se.
Of course. And the only reason I ask is just because Ben indicated that he's writing a full script with page 1, panel 1. Here's what happens. Here's what's going on. There are other writers that I've interviewed who talk very much about giving just sort of general sense of what the page is and letting the artist make all of the decisions. And so just sort of wondering about the space and the friction there.
As a writer, like, I definitely want to make sure I'm giving all my like artistic collaborators like the freedom to bounce and have ideas and remix. But when I send in a script, what I never want to have an artist have to do is get to a page and think to themselves, all right, now how am I gonna make this one work? Like, I wanna always have enough of a blueprint to at least have there be like a guideline to work off, that make sure there's always like, again, that minimal information needed to at least just like know what the page is.
Yeah, and I can recall a few instances of where I would actually add in something that wasn't in the script just because I felt like it made the scene a little more dynamic in some ways. Just like that things are occurring in the background as well. So like the things that you're meant to be paying attention to might be what they're saying, and then I just add in maybe a tiny little action on top of that.
I loved all of those so much. They just added, and those touches added just so much life and energy to it.
Because Mr. Muffins was a graphic novel and therefore you knew what your pagination would be, did you, either of you, think about what you were doing in terms of the double page spreads, or were you still mostly concerned with page by page?
I think mostly page by page. I know there's definitely some like splash pages, but I don't think I went too deep into the double page splashes. I'm always a little hesitant when it comes to double page splashes for, especially in a graphic novel, just because, put a graphic, you put something in early enough or late enough, then you get screwed up by the edits. You're not just dealing with, changing one page. Now you might be, if you have to delete one page in chapter 2, well, now your double page spread in chapter 4 doesn't work. So you better edit around all of your double page spread placements. And I've done that before on some other books, and it's always just like an extra headache.
Yeah, let me rephrase, because I didn't actually mean double page spreads per se. What I meant was when you're looking at
Like side by side.
Side by side, yeah, right? So that is different than that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Giorgio, are you laying them out? Because I've spoken to some artists who definitely work in 2-page increments. Was that a thing you did, or were you taking it a page by page?
In this case, I was more so taking it page by page. With my other projects, like the ones that I had written, if there were instances where I wanted something to be on the other page, I would have to think about that in advance. But not much of that happened in Mr. Muffins per se, where there's like a big reveal on the page turn that I had to pay attention to, at least.
Yeah, not on the page turn. I know I should say I pay very close attention to the page turns and always keep it in mind. But again, when you're drafting and it's like, then you find like, oh, this, you could write your whole first draft with all those page turns in mind. And then it's like, hey, the beginning of chapter 2 isn't quite reading. I think we need one more page to like really kind of nail the world building. It's like, cool, we've added one more page and now every page turn is off
Sure.
for the next 80 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe like a little aspect of that would be something we didn't utilize, but it does help us be more flexible and being able to manipulate the story a little bit as we get further into it.
Yeah, no,
I think there's, and I've been alluding to it, what's on, the big final confrontation that Reuben and Mr. Muffins have to face. I think that was the one area where we were like, this one we really want to make sure we have on the page turn.
Yeah.
Like, this is the one big surprise we want to make sure like people get the full impact of. But I'm still not going to say what it is.
No, it's all good. It's all good. I think that is a sensible thing to do. Was it hard to write Muffins himself as a character, given that he doesn't have any dialogue beyond dog dialogue?
No, Mr. Muffins was the biggest joy of a character to write for. Just this big happy puppy of a dog. Because one of the things I said on very early on the story was that for all of his powers, that he can fly, he can shoot lasers, he can form force fields, absolutely none of his powers will increase his intelligence or give him the ability to talk. That was one of my storytelling edicts. That if this story had a story Bible, this would have been like the first commandment. Like, Mr. Muffins has normal corgi intelligence and with normal corgi behavior, and just this silly, playful, oblivious dog being entrusted with the fate of the universe just never stopped being silly and fun and adorable to write.
Yeah. Do you have dogs of your own?
I grew up with a cockapoo, half cocker spaniel, half poodle. His name was Renegade, and he was very much just this playful, chubby teddy bear of a dog, and that was very much what I kind of wanted Mr. Muffins to feel like, was just like, oh, this this teddy bear of a dog is now the cosmic chosen one.
Giorgio, how about you? Do you have a dog yourself?
I do. I have a dog named Mai.
Nice.
Yeah.
What breed?
She's in the back of the book, actually.
Oh.
Yes, we put pictures of our pets in the back. I have some
Mhm.
photos of my cat Blargy, who
There we go.
taking care of him, my first pet as an adult, inspired a lot of the themes about responsibility and taking care of your, what as a human you owe your pet. I was inspired by a lot of that and everything I had to learn about, properly taking care of a pet cat and giving it everything it needs to be happy.
Yeah. Well, cats and dogs are very, very different, though.
Yes, cats are not built for adventuring. That's still why we picked a dog for this.
I hear that. That's funny. Giorgio, you mentioned that you are drawing on an iPad, so you're drawing completely digitally?
Yeah, the thing from Muffins that was done on paper were those little note card rough layouts I told you about, and the cover inked by hand, sketched in ink by hand. Actually, no, I sketched it on the iPad, printed it, and then inked it over paper, and then scanned it back in, and then colored it digitally.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
What was your reasoning for doing that?
Speed, efficiency. As much as I love paper, it just wasn't gonna work for how things needed to be done. I actually did like a whole video about my process and why I ended up adopting the iPad as like my primary workflow for Mr. Muffins. But basically, it came down to ink being very unforgiving and me needing the flexibility of being able to just hit the go back button.
Real life desperately needs a Command Z function.
Indeed.
This video, is it available publicly somewhere?
Yeah, it's on YouTube. My YouTube is by the same name, Giorgio Brooks. And I think it's just titled My Ultimate Comics Tool.
Yeah.
Cool. I will tell people to look for that. I'll go look for it myself. So
Yeah,
I always love
actually-
seeing process.
Right, those
yeah.
process videos are always fun.
Yeah, because everybody's different, and that's the other great thing about comics is just how everybody's approach to craft is very different. Even how people approach thumbnails. I mean, this 2 thumbnail process that you described, and I've done almost 300 interviews now. I don't think anyone has ever told they do that before, and that's great. I think it's fantastic.
Well, one part about this book in particular that I enjoyed the process of, this book had the best research. The best time I've ever had researching was for this project because all my research was just watching corgis play.
Yeah.
Just lots of just corgi play videos. And then it's be like, oh, so that's how they bat their paws at one another. Okay, good to know. That's adorable. Just hours of corgi videos. And I got to be like, this counts as working. I'm doing research right now.
Were there things that you changed as a result of watching corgi videos?
It was more like I took a lot of reference images for like, especially being like, oh, this is how this is like what a corgi, especially for more like, because I really wanted the fighting for Mr. Muffins to also look like playing and just kind of doggy roughhousing.
Yeah.
So that was helpful for getting like real reference images of actual corgis in play.
Were you sharing those with Giorgio, or Giorgio,
Oh,
were you
yeah.
doing your own research of this? Or?
No, so I put reference images in all my scripts and stuff, especially so that's more writing advice is that there is no rule that says you can't put reference images and links in your comic scripts.
Sure.
So if I have a particular environment, a particularly hard to describe facial expression, or an object that I think is difficult to describe or needs to be specific, I will absolutely, plop down a Dropbox link to a JPEG right there in the script. It's some extra help for the artist.
Nice. And this was helpful to you, Giorgio, I'm assuming?
Oh, absolutely. And there may have even been like 1 or 2 instances where I ended up finding like a reference photo and maybe presenting it to Ben and being like, do you think it's something like this? Or
Yeah,
References,
especially in
love 'em.
reference image. Yep, I said especially in the design phase where you're looking at a lot of axolotl pictures we were sharing to get Kasara's design right.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, that was such a funny design process because we started with like the axolotl influence design, then started moving away from it, came up with a bunch of other ideas, and then went right back to like, nope, axolotl was best right this time.
Love it. Let's see. The lettering was done by Susie Lee. Were there any particular instructions or things that y'all asked for, or is it just let another professional do their job and figure it out on their own?
I mean, definitely a lot of just trusting her to know what she's doing. I definitely went through the script, and especially, you asked me, any particular challenges or difficulties for writing Mr. Muffins is just this dog. And as much fun as is writing, this dog who's being attacked by an alien armada but thinks he's just playing chase time. Went through every script. I went through every line of the book, and I had to ask myself at every line, should this be should this be a dialogue balloon, or should this be a sound effect? And I had to go through every arf, bark, and woof and yip in the book and decide if I thought it should be better as a balloon or as a sound effect.
Makes sense.
I was wondering what that process was like for you, actually.
It was very, very trust in your gut. What it was, I looked at like your art, I looked at the script, and it was a lot of subconscious metrics at play for me to get each answer.
Do you, Giorgio, when you're getting your layouts or doing your pencil stage, do you like sort of rough in the dialogue yourself just so you know where it goes and how much space it needs to have? Or again, do you just trust the letterer to handle that?
Oh yeah, I totally plan for that as I'm making the pages. None of this is visible on the line art, of course, but as I was doing the thumbnails, I was actually planning where the bubble would theoretically go. And it helped a lot for making sure there were room for things. There were a few places where I just didn't imagine a large enough bubble, and maybe like one thing that I didn't want to get cut off got cut off just to make room. But by design, I was always planning what bubble goes where in advance.
Nice, nice.
That's really important for making sure, for just keeping that in mind.
You will be in trouble if you don't.
Yeah. Again, I've spoken to a couple artists who don't. They let the letterer do whatever they need to do. I've never really understood that myself, but I've talked to people who work that way. So
well, I think you talked about like the panel layouts and the art guiding people through the page. The lettering can be such an ally in that, and being like such an extra tool in guiding people a specific way. And balloon placements can be so huge in that guiding process.
Yeah, it's like an aspect of design philosophy. I definitely, with my pages, prefer for there to be a little bit of room for them to breathe. So for me, that means that the speech bubbles don't really push up against the characters much. That's just like my preference.
And there were definitely times where I got the pages back from Giorgio, and I was comparing them to the script and just being like, I don't need this particular line. I don't need a line to tell people how this person is feeling. Look at this face. This art is communicating everything I need to know. This line gone. Don't need it. And that's a great feeling. That's one of the best feelings as a comic book writer, is knowing you can just flat out delete a line because everything that needs saying is being said by the art.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because again, in a lot of ways, making a comic is all about sort of winnowing, getting things down as small as you can, as least as you can, let the audience fill in the rest. Yeah, no, I like that a lot. Did you know that it was going to be in this format, in the sort of the digest format, or did you think it was going to be a full size comic book?
I'd say it's kind of like the size I expected. I thought it might. Yeah, I'm like, I know, Giorgio, they sent you like the size specs and how the pages needed to be uploaded. I guess I didn't really think about it, but I guess it didn't surprise me when I got the physical copies either.
I had a template that they sent me, and this is what I expected page wise. So that was another thing I thought about, how large certain things should be.
Yeah. Did it change anything, Giorgio, about how you drew or what you put on a page? Because it looks like your PFA comic that you were showing was kind of magazine size, and then you've done a lot of sort of traditional comic book size pages as well. So was this a change at all for you?
No, this is actually closer to home, because that one that I showed you was larger, but that's like the exception.
Yeah.
But more so, I was learning to draw around this size, like 6x9 and smaller. Not sure exactly what size this is.
Something like 6x9, yeah.
But they provided that to me pretty early on. So even as soon as I started doing the second go at the layouts, I was already putting them within that frame.
Nice. How about the color? What was the process like for you doing the color, Giorgio?
I really wanted to impress myself with the colors. And a lot of that was research of me just stockpiling images of artists that just made pieces that kind of wowed me. And a lot of the book is actually divided into scenes having like a certain color palette.
Yeah.
And yeah, I just kind of had like a loose design library. And Flatter, James, was
Yeah,
also, yeah,
James Penafiel. Yep,
I was
his
trying to figure out his
beater.
last name, Pinafil.
I might not be pronouncing it correctly, but I'm trying my but giving it my best shot.
And just well, shout out to James for doing the flats for me. That was a huge help for sure. But
Yeah,
yeah,
especially my favorite color I got for you was like the
mhm.
first time seeing the planet they go to and spend chapter 2 on Voltaria. And it's just this gorgeous planet with these pink, like cotton candy skies and these giant mushroom forests. And the mushrooms, these reds and blues and yellows. It just like, it felt like this my new favorite Super Mario Brothers world that I didn't know I had never seen until now.
It's like the book is the purple bag of Skittles.
Yes, the best bag of Skittles.
Yeah, no, I liked the color quite a bit, and I like the fact that it's mostly flat color, and it's not, there's pages with gradation and stuff, but it's mostly very flat and very simple, but in a good way.
Mhm.
Color, yeah, yeah, no, it's an exceptional book. I think you guys did a great job on this, and yeah,
Um,
this you should be very proud and happy of this comic.
Thank you so much.
Very, very cool. Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah, yeah.
Set out to make an adorable outer space dog adventure, and I think we succeeded.
You surely did. You surely did. Are you guys working on anything else together?
Not at the moment. I am currently trying to keep my head above water with a current crop of some deadlines, but man, we made Mr. Muffins together. We made Immortals Phoenix Rising together. It's a real fun Greek mythology adventure. And I don't know about you, Giorgio, but I would love to team up again anytime.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. I love that. Is there anything that either of you have coming up that you would like to and or are able to pitch just to let people know what's coming up?
Giorgio, you want to go first? Or if you
Well, nothing for me at the moment per se.
I
Encouraging people to read Mr. Muffins.
Yes, definitely check out Giorgio's YouTube channel though. He's got lots of travel and art videos.
Cool.
I got to give you the plug.
Appreciate it.
Gotta do it. Ben, anything you want to plug?
Yeah, so definitely my next book right now that's been announced is The Dashing School for Wayward Princes, which I co-wrote with Jeremy Whitley with art by Melissa Caglione, and that is about a trans princess sent to a school to teach royalty toxic masculinity. So that'll be coming out from Simon and Schuster. But I would say in terms of past work, maybe check out Renegade Rule, my graphic novel from Dark Horse, nominated for a GLAAD Award with co-writer Rachel Silverstein and artist Sam Beck. Might be good to catch up on that before some other stuff I can't quite talk about yet.
Nice. Very good. Cool. Well, is there anything that I should have asked you about, Mr. Muffins, that I didn't ask?
Oh boy, I don't know. Anything we want? I guess just I don't know. I think I just want to personally say the hugest thank you to everyone who picked up the book and gave it a read. Giorgio and I poured our heart and soul into this story, and I hope it makes you smile, and I hope it gives you some laughs and some thrills and makes you go a whole bunch.
I think it did. I think it did. Cool. All right. Well, then let me go to the last question, which, much like the first, I ask basically the same question every interview, and it's basically this: that because this is a series of videos, as I say, I've done almost 100 interviews at this point. There's a good number of people who watch these who want to make their own comics, and what I hear from a lot of people are, I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know. I don't know how to do the comics right. I'm not sure of myself. So if you had to give a piece of advice to an aspiring writer, to an aspiring artist who wants to make comics, but just isn't sure of themselves, what might that advice be? It could be something physical and practical. It could be something emotional. It could be something spiritual. But what would the advice be?
I would say.
Ben,
Sorry,
why don't
didn't
you
mean
go
to speak
first?
up. Okay. I would say if what's holding you back from taking that step of like going out and making something is a fear that it won't be good enough, all I say is the only way you're going to get better is by doing it. So like if you feel like your script writing isn't up to snuff, the only way it's going to get better is by writing scripts, figuring out what you feel you're doing right, figuring out what you need to work on, and then working on that. If your first comic isn't the best, okay, make more. Just keep making. But yeah, that's what I would say is that if the only way to get better is to go out and do it, and there's so much to be said for anyone as even in the industry, like if you're just trying to like break into the industry, one of the biggest things you can do is make a comic. Just show that not only that you have the artistic and creative skills, but that you have the dedication and the follow through to launch a project and see it through and complete it. And showing that kind of just spirit goes a very long way.
I would agree. GEORGEO, you have something to add to that?
Yeah, adding to that, especially from the art side of things, there might be like this desire to try to make your first project like perfect. Just let that go. Just let it go. It's not going to be perfect. And I would say it's better when you're starting out and maybe you feel like you're not ready to just create a lot of smaller projects and get them finished, because you'll learn a lot more doing a lot of small projects than you will taking forever to do one large one. So you'll probably feel yourself improving and building up your confidence and library of techniques a lot faster. So, start small.
Yeah, definitely. And this is even on the writer side, try to make like short, if you're not going to start with like short comics, like I said, it could be definitely unreasonable to, I would say like, yes, save up to pay an artist to do a whole graphic novel, but you try to save up enough to hire an artist to do like a 4-page comic, or anthologies. Anthologies are a great way to meet new creators, really gather just a network of peers, and just get started and just kind of get your name on and just start writing something. Especially because a lot of these anthologies have really interesting premises and stories that'll challenge you as a writer and push your imagination to great places.
Makes a whole lot of sense to me. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time and talking to us about Mr. Muffins. As I said, it's a really great, fun book, and you should be really proud of the thing that you've made here. I truly think.
Of course.
That. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. If you will give me a couple minutes just to do a little thank yous and stuff here, we're gonna push you off to the side. I'll bring you back here at the end. But hey, how you doing? So how are you doing, by the way? Are you doing okay? Because it's a tough time right now. There's a lot of stuff going on. Well, sometimes you just need something that's gonna be fun and that's gonna make you laugh. And corgis and intergalactic space battles. I think this is a thing. If you want something that's going to make you feel good, thoroughly recommend Mr. Muffins. You can buy it from us. Obviously, you can. There's a thing on the screen. You'll see it shortly. But if you don't want to get it from us, just get it from your local comic shop. Get it from your library. Go to the library. The library is a great source. Mr. Muffins, you're going to really enjoy this book. Next month's Kids Club is Bring Me the Head of Susan Lomond by Connor B. Not Connor C. From Silver Sprocket. This is a fun book. I think you guys will really like that. So look for that next month. And then the next interview that we're doing is for the Adult Club. And I am talking to, I'm going to probably mispronounce his last name here, but Hugh DeAndre, who did this, which is The Murder Next Door. And it's about him growing up as a child, and well, there was a murder next door to him as a child, and how it affected him and how he's dealt with it as he aged and moved on. Excellent book. So look for that interview next time. And then the month after, we'll get the head of Susan Lomond. All right. I got a couple of thank yous I want to make. I want to thank you, my staff. I want to thank Kat and Katie and Chrissy and Max for just being a great staff who let me do things that I couldn't do otherwise, such as sitting and interviewing creators about making comics, which is kind of my funnest part of the job. And I want to thank Ben for running the show today. I want to thank Jordan, my producer, for doing all the backstage stuff that none of you see, but that we couldn't have a show without him. I want to thank all of the members of the club, all the people who watch these videos too. If this is your first video, you can hit the little like button and you can get more. There's 2 videos a month, which is, I think, kind of exciting. And we're always trying to talk about the best in comics and why comics are so good, which hopefully you got the impression of what we're trying to get at here. And more than anything else, I want to thank the creators, the people who make comics, people like Ben and Giorgio, because as I say, without you guys doing this, I would be sitting in a store full of blank pages right now, which is just about the saddest thing that I could possibly imagine. The fact that I'm sitting in a store full of dreams and full of visions and full of passion is kind of the greatest thing about my life. And so thank you for letting me have that. Honestly, the two of you, I really, really appreciate that.
Oh, well, thank you. And take that, people who own notebook stores with your stores full of empty pages.
Exactly, right? I don't see how they can function at all. Anyway, thank you again for taking the time and talking to us today. And yeah, we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much for having us.